Hi guys, and welcome back to the Bird Photography Show with Glenn Bartley.
Hello everybody.
And me, Jan Wegener.
Before we get into the topic of this week's show, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who's purchased our new setup guides for the R7 and R5. We're so happy to hear that they're helping you to set up your camera to get the best possible results. And of course, a big thank you to everybody who's purchased our PROSETS and are having fantastic results in the digital darkroom with those. Now, on this week's episode, we're going to be sharing a few stories from the field, we're going to be giving some photo tips, and we're also going to be introducing a new segment on our show called the Photo of the Week. So why don't we get right into it?
Not so fast, Glenn. We actually have to announce the winner of last episode's Hummingbird Book giveaway first. And the winner this week, John Drummond. So thanks so much for participating in the comment section, liking our videos, subscribing to the channel, and enjoying our videos. And of course, in this video, we have one more book to give away. And if you want to win that, make sure to watch till the end because we tell you exactly how you can win it.
And just one quick note, you know, the internet is full of a lot of spammers out there. And we do note on some of our videos, especially when you're doing a giveaway, you get a lot of these spam bots trying to trick you into clicking on something. So we will never contact you in that way, like a comment on a comment and tell you that you won something or to do something. We will always announce the winner of the book on the next show and we'll contact you directly. You can also always tell if you click on the picture of the commenter, if it looks suspicious and you see that they have no videos or they have no YouTube content, then it's not us. So be careful out there and just make sure you don't get tricked by anybody.
Totally, don't get scammed.
So yeah, and it looks like you're back in your home office, you're back in the studio, you're back from your road trip. So I think you need to share with us some stories from this huge road trip.
After every long trip, coming home is always a little bit strange. Like we've been on the road for over 2 months. Didn't even drive that much. I think only around 8,500 kilometers. So in terms of road trips in Australia, that's still kind of low key. But yeah, we saw a lot of amazing habitats. But actually when I came home, I was very excited to find something else on my desk. And that's some stamps from Australia Post with my photos on it made into stamps and also a coin. If you know me, I've been a bit of a secret bird stamp collector, especially parrots. So having my own pictures on stamps, that was very cool. But of all the birds I've ever photographed in my life, I didn't think an orange-footed scrub fowl and the brush turkey would be the ones ending up on stamps.
You'd probably be thinking fairy wren, parrot, you know, something like that. Isn't it funny, Jan, how having something tangible, like, you know, in this case, these stamps, or, you know, my book, there's still something that's at a higher level of kind of excitement when you see something tangible, that you see your images and you realize that people outside of sort of the normal world of bird photographers are going to use those stamps. People who don't know anything about birds are going to use those stamps. They're going to see them, they might learn to appreciate those birds, and who knows what kind of, you know, love for birds you'll spark with something like that. So I think that's really cool.
No, I totally agree. Having this tangible thing in your hand is still different. Like I've seen these photos a million times, but then seeing it printed and kind of drawn in like a cool style, it just makes it feel different. And it's just something I'm pretty happy about, and hopefully it wasn't the last time.
Enough about your stamps, Jan. You've bored the people with your stamps.
Sorry.
No, tell us some stories. Tell us some stories from the road. Tell us something that you were really excited to shoot, or what was some fun memories from this trip?
Yes, there was definitely one spot that stood out to me, and it was a beautiful little lake on the Atherton Tablelands. And I filmed a little clip for you there. I just got here to this car park. I was looking for rifle birds, but I haven't seen them at all. But my R500 to 500, because in the bush behind me, there's a lot of different honeyeaters, like Bridle's honeyeaters, Maclay's honeyeater, Dusky honeyeater. So I'm now trying to get some shots here. The difficulty obviously is that most of the time the birds are sitting in the middle of the scrub. But if you position yourself in the right position, you should be able to get some nice shots on the outside branches. So that's what I'm going to do. Wish me luck, and hopefully we can get some images.
So that looked like a cool setup. So how did it go? Did any of the birds actually come out to those little bits on the edge, and did you get the shots you were hoping for?
With the right positioning, I was definitely able to get some shots. Obviously, the birds were often feeding right in the tree. And actually, if one of you guys know what that tree is, let us know in the comments, because I'm not sure myself. I just love it because it looks so cool with these puffy little flowers. This was actually one of the occasions where I also liked using the R7, because to get some of these exposed branches at the top, the reach on the R5 was a little bit limited. And so sometimes I walked up the hill a little bit further and then used the R7 and was able to photograph some of the birds on top. And definitely one exciting thing about this whole area was that there was a few honey eaters that I really wanted to photograph that I couldn't find anywhere else. And they were all feeding basically out in the open in this one tree.
A one-stop shop.
Yeah, and here we can see some of the results, like this McClay's honey eater and this beautiful bridled honey eater. And like always, I used DxO Pure Raw to get rid of the noise, used our PROSETS to get the colors right and get me to a great starting point with just one click. And then I used my workflow that I teach in my masterclass.
If you guys are interested in learning more about Photoshop and making sure that your photos are absolutely the best they can possibly be, sure to check out those links down in the description. What was the main gear you felt like you were using the most on this trip? And what are some of the things that you brought with you on this road trip that saw a lot of action?
I definitely used the 100 to 500 millimeter lens or more, especially for convenience reason, but also if you're in a new area, you don't always know where the birds are. You might have to walk for an extended period of time. So I had this little f-stop backpack with me that I packed full like crazy. I had an R3 with a 24 to 105, an R5 with 100 to 500 and the battery grip, and an R7 in there, as well as the Ninja screen and the flash and some other little helpers. So it allowed me to have a relatively lightweight setup to just walk around, scout some locations, and then if I was actually finding a bird, the 100 to 500 was usually good enough to get me some shots on the spot, because you would know as well, if you have a big 600 millimeter lens and you're not sure if you're even going to find a good spot, it becomes very heavy on your shoulders very quick.
Totally. There's no question that it's super exciting to see the potential of higher megapixel bodies with crop factors and the potential to be able to maybe someday ditch these big super telephotos, but we're not quite there yet. But anyways, it's nice to have that versatility, that's for sure.
So while the 100 to 500 isn't perfect in all situations, I'm definitely growing more and more fond of it because it's great flexibility and a good image quality. But as we all know, gear isn't everything, is it, Glenn? There's other factors that are super important if you want to take the best photos or get any photos.
Honestly, one of the most important things that any nature photographer, any bird photographer can do is to just try to be prepared in the field. And that really encompasses a lot of things. You know, it can really be a lot of different things. I filmed actually a little video while I was out in the boreal forest somewhere in Ontario. So why don't we take a quick look at that?
I knew it was only a matter of time before the old bug net needed to come out.
I mean, I got out of the car and there was already about 30 mosquitoes on me. So it's really important to be prepared when you're out in nature if you're going to enjoy yourself taking pictures. Let's take a look at what I've got in my infamous fanny pack. You should always have extra battery, at least one, and definitely extra memory card. Now, another way that you can be prepared as a wildlife photographer, as a bird photographer, is knowing the calls of the birds that you're after. So I always try to listen to the calls before I go out, maybe even in the car before I head off. Now here, I'm after the bay-breasted warbler. It's a beautiful northern boreal species of warbler. And so I've listened to the call a bunch of times, and I'm really hoping that as I'm walking through this spruce forest that's here in front of me, that I might hear one calling, and then I can really set up and try to hope that it comes down and is out on some nice spruce bough and I can get the shots that I'm after.
These were some fantastic trips, and that's actually some really pretty cool looking landscape out there as well. I don't need a mosquito net around here, at least not at the moment, so that's good. But being prepared is crucial when it comes to getting the images that you want.
And sometimes it's easier than others. I mean, obviously if you live in one particular place, you get used to the birds' calls there, you get used to sort of the way that just sort of nature operates around you. But when you're on a road trip, or when you've gone to a different country, or when you're in a different part of your country like you just were, it's a lot harder when you're sort of waking up each day and it's like, okay, I don't know these bird calls, I don't know what's around me. You know you want to probably photograph them, but you're not even sure who it is. So Did you find that on your trip where it was just sort of like a bit more challenging when you're in unfamiliar surrounds?
I definitely had that issue as well, and I would have loved to know all the bird calls that I was hearing every morning. That was definitely a challenge, and I think it was part of the reason that I was often having the small backpack with the smaller 100 to 500 millimeter lens, because it just allowed me to walk around and find nice spots, because finding spots isn't that easy either unless you have one spot that you know that's good you can go to right away. You're usually looking on like ebook or Facebook for general areas, but then you still need to find the spot where the birds actually are.
You have to have your eyes open, and when you do see that opportunity that presents itself to potentially be able to get some really good shots, that's when you really need to be prepared with the right equipment and the right technique and just springing into action a plan of how you're going to get the shot.
Totally, and I had a moment exactly like that in the field. I was going to an area that I'd never been before. I parked my car, it was already pretty late in the afternoon, rainforest, so kind of dark. And suddenly I see all these grey-headed robins hopping around on the car park, a bird that I really wanted to photograph that's endemic to that far north Queensland area. I only got the shots because I prepared weeks before. I always have cable ties with me, and I had a few little worms with me as well. So I quickly found a mossy perch, cable tied it to the fence that the birds were hopping along, and then within a few minutes I was actually able to get some really cool shots of these birds that I never wouldn't have gotten otherwise, because they're just so used to sitting on the picnic table or on the fence itself or on the grass that they're not really just randomly jumping on something. But having thought about photographing robins potentially weeks before I actually did it allowed me to get these shots in like this really short period of time that I had, because I may have had like 20-30 minutes to photograph before it was too dark and I wasn't able to go back to the spot. So just being able to be prepared and then actually use that preparedness in the field got me some pretty cool shots.
The take-home message is whatever you're photographing, wherever you're photographing, you have to be prepared. You have to plan out what you might be able to shoot, have the right equipment, have the right gear, have the right knowledge. Make sure you educate yourself on the birds in that area, their calls, and you're going to have a much more enjoyable and almost certainly more productive photo shoot. Okay, so like we said at the beginning of the show, we're going to be starting a brand new segment now, which is going to be the photo of the week, and we'll tell you more about it at the end here. So we're going to start with one of Jan's photos from his recent trip. Why don't you show us your photo there, Jan?
It's a shining flycatcher I really wanted to photograph. This is actually the female, and there was a few birds around, and they make the weirdest kind of poses when they're kind of just fighting with each other and calling.
Well, that's a good looking little flycatcher there. So what equipment did you use to take that photo, Jan?
I used the R5 100 to 500 wide open at f7.1 ISO 12,800 because they love the darkest parts of the mangroves. Yeah. And it was like, I think a 2/50th of a second handheld.
It's amazing actually looking at the photo, you would never suspect that it was shot at 12,800 or even that it was in a super dark environment. So that's shows the advancement of the ISO technology for sure.
You can see in the raw file here as well, it's obviously a lot noisier, a lot darker, but then with our workflow and the PROSETS, it cleaned up pretty well. But the key is really working on some of the areas like the bird's head in this case, like manually with some different brushes and some different curves to really bring out the color and make all the areas look nice and light.
What is it that you like about this photo?
What really stood out to me in this image is actually just the background as well. I was actually kind of positioning myself near that branch because I was thinking, ooh, this would look really nice here. It's nice and open. And I'm actually more drawn towards including structure sometimes in the background. The background is still dissolved, but it's not completely just one color.
Yeah.
And so it might give a hint of the environment. In this case, we can see some upright trees and sort of some more in focus and some more out of focus leaves. And then obviously I just really enjoyed the post that shows all the colors of the birds. The tail is nice and fanned. You see everything the bird is about basically.
Well, is there anything in this image that you wished you could have changed or that you would hope for if you were to go back to that same site and try to photograph them again?
In this case, probably not. I'd like to get some other photos, but I must say I'm pretty happy with the photo.
Maybe a lower ISO.
Maybe a lower ISO, but it cleaned up really well. Like looking at it now, it's not like you go, ooh, this is so bad, I need another photo. I'd definitely like to get more photos, different photos, but I think for me personally, at least as a photo itself, it's pretty good. What do you think about it?
If there's one thing that stands out, it's the pose. I'm sure when you were editing this, there was a potential temptation to crop in tighter and But then it starts to get, like you said, sort of too stark and there's nothing interesting or whatever going on. So I think you've done a good job of sort of balancing that, a bit of habitat, a bit of texture in the background, and definitely, like I said, the cool bird with that interesting pose, I think, is what really makes this one stand out for me.
I think what you say is very important. Because it's such a striking pose, this works. If the bird was just sitting there like this, you'd probably be like, it's too wide, it doesn't really work. So Glenn, did you bring us any goodies we can tear apart in this segment?
Oh. I don't know. Yeah, well, I brought an image of a male Blackburnian warbler. And this is a bird that I've seen like hundreds, probably thousands of them down in the Andes, because in the sort of tropical Andes, it's a really common wintering bird down there. So I've seen like exponentially more Blackburnian warblers in Colombia and Ecuador than I have in Canada. And my only shots of these guys were from like, I don't know, 2006 or something like that, a long time ago. And I really, on this trip, wanted to try to improve and spend some time in the right habitat so that I'd give myself a good chance to get some better shots of it. Well, Jan, based on this image, why don't you guess kind of what my settings might have been for this image?
All right, so you were shooting with the extender. I know you don't like stopping down too much, so I think you were slightly stopped down f6.3. The beak of the bird is not blurry when it's singing, so I think it has to be at least like an 800th of a second. And you don't like super high ISO, so I would guess ISO 1600 at least, maybe 3200, because this background is pretty dark, but the bird's pretty bright, so that can be tricky. But let's say 1600 ISO.
Well, Jan did pretty well there. So I was indeed at f6.3, so I was stopped down a third of a stop. With that background being fairly close, I didn't want to get too much texture in the background. I was at an 800th of a second, so you were right on the money there. But I was even lower ISO. I was actually only at ISO 800. I thought, you know, I wanted to keep it down.
So what's your own thoughts about this image? It's obviously a great singing pose on a beautiful perch. What was your thinking? Did you crop it a lot? I assume you did.
It's not a huge crop, to be honest. The bird was a good size in the frame. This warbler, like, of course, you really want to see that orange.
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight the spruce tree, the singing pose, the orange throat, and that kind of, I think I ticked all those boxes in this image.
Now you can really appreciate the throat and the chest without having too much around it. So really well done.
Well, guys, we hope you enjoyed this first installment of the Photo of the Week segment. You know, to get the ball rolling, Jan and I will share some of our images, but we actually really want to see some of your images in future Photo of the Week segment.
And if you want to participate in this segment and you're posting on Instagram, make sure to now use the hashtag BirdPhotoShow. And Glenn and I will go through the images of that hashtag on Instagram and pick our favorites for a given week, and then critique them, say what we like, and maybe some things we don't like, but we're gonna be nice, aren't we?
We'll be nice. We'll be nice.
So Glenn, book time. How do we get it this week?
This time around in this episode, we talked a lot about being prepared and, you know, how do we make sure that we take the right steps in order to take the best photos. So what we want you to do is down in the comments, tell us one thing that when you go in the field, you never leave home without.
And of course, make also sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and this book could be with you very soon.
And if you have recently purchased an R7 or you're the owner of an R5, be sure to check out our setup guides for those cameras. And of course, if you want your images to look the best they possibly can be, you definitely want to be using our PROSETS, and take a look at Jan's masterclass video and my Photoshop ebooks. And we will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching.
Bye guys.